world that your parents grew up in and the world that you are growing up in are very different from each other. Until the 1990s, most goods like cars, clothes, television sets and cold drinks were limited and produced in India itself. Today, however, there is a wide range of options for the products that you can buy. From clothes to cold drinks, cars to television sets, and almost everything else, the choice is immense. One of the main reasons for such rapid transformation from hardly any choice to wide-ranging availability of the latest models of products is the coming together or the integration of production, trade, investment and markets from different parts of the globe. Behind the integration of production, trade, investment and markets lay the rise of multinational corporations or MNCs from about the middle of the 20th century. The seeds of such MNCs were sown during colonial times. In the 18th and 19th centuries, companies like the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company had their headquarters in Europe. Nevertheless, the companies also operated in the colonies in Asia, Africa, and other parts of the world. Even after the rule of the colonies was taken over directly by the mother countries, the link between the colonizers and the colonies remained. However, there was a crucial difference between production then and production by the modern MNCs. Goods were produced largely inside the boundaries of individual countries. Colonies such as India produced raw material as well as foodstuff and exported them to Britain. In return, it imported finished goods from Britain or other European countries. The colonies and the mother country were linked to each other through trade. Production still occurred within the boundaries of a country. With the independence of the colonies in the 1940s and the 1950s, this link between production and export of raw material and the import of finished goods continued. A new type of company, known as the multinational company, arose in the developed nations of North America, Europe, and Japan. They wanted to spread to areas where they could produce their goods cheaply and find markets for them. Countries in Asia, Africa, and Central and South America were the ideal places for these MNCs to set up offices and factories. Labor and other resources were cheap. The markets were large, and the chances of earning profits were huge. Initially, however, the indigenous production in these countries of Asia, Africa, and South America was protected through trade and other barriers. However, most of these countries gradually liberalized their policies, just like it happened in India in the 1990s. After liberalization, MNCs were able to enter Asian, South American and African countries to exploit their cheap labor and large markets. Thus began a process of globalization, where the MNCs produced and marketed their products globally, often separating the process into small portions. For instance, A company may manufacture its basic components in an area where labor is cheap. It may assemble the goods at another location that is close to the developed markets. And it may have its call centers at a location where English is already a spoken language. By having access to cheap labor and resources and using the spread-out method of production, MNCs can produce their goods at half the cost that they would have otherwise. This means that they make enormous profits. There are many factors that MNCs take into account while setting up factories and offices for production in a country. MNCs look for proximity to markets where they can sell their products. Another major factor is the availability of cheap labor, both skilled and unskilled, that MNCs can employ in the factories. MNCs also take into account the availability of other resources like raw material and infrastructure like transport, electricity, and banking facilities when they put up factories in a country. MNCs may also be more comfortable in countries where they can influence the government's policies in their favor. Did you know, before the Indian government adopted a policy of liberalization in 1991, most MNCs were not allowed to set up their offices and factories in India. Once assured of markets, labor, other resources, and favorable policies, MNCs then set up offices and factories. To set up these offices and factories, MNCs buy land, machinery, and other equipment that is required. This is known as foreign investment. MNCs invest in foreign countries because they hope to make profits. MNCs follow several modes of foreign investment in countries like India. MNCs sometimes collaborate with local companies. In such partnerships, MNCs benefit from the local knowledge and contacts of the local company. The local companies, on the other hand, benefit from the investment as well as the latest technology that MNCs bring with them. Another method of foreign investment, more common than partnering, is for MNCs to buy up local companies and spread their control over production and investment. In this manner, MNCs move into and expand the local company's existing production base, contacts, and markets without having to begin from scratch. A third channel that MNCs use for foreign investment is to place orders with small local producers. MNCs invest in small producers who make and supply the products to them, who then sell it under their banner. Globalization has influenced the Indian economy since 1991. Let us review its effect on consumers, producers, and those who work for the global sectors. Consumers have largely benefited from globalization. Producers of goods, in order to be viable, have had to compete with each other to the benefit of the consumers. This has resulted in lower prices and a greater choice of goods. However, consumers who have benefited the most are the well-off urban middle class. Can you imagine why? The well-off sections of society are the ones who can afford to buy the kind of consumer goods that are available in the market today. As a result, their lifestyle has changed dramatically. If we assess the impact of globalization on producers, we find the result to be mixed. Some producers have benefited immensely, while others have suffered at the hands of globalization. MNCs are one set of obvious beneficiaries. They have posted tremendous profits and invested more and more in India in the last 18 years. MNC's investment and production has largely been in the consumer goods sector like automobiles, electronic items, fast foods, cold drinks and mobiles. Some have also invested in sectors like power or services like banking. MNCs have also benefited as they have been provided accommodation in special economic zones or SEZs with state-of-the-art facilities, a 5-year tax holiday, and flexible labor laws in their favor. All in all, MNCs have made huge profits since they entered the Indian market. In addition, some local companies who have collaborated with the MNCs to supply them raw material or services have also gained from globalization. People who have found employment with MNCs or their allies have also obviously gained from globalization. Some big Indian companies like Tata Motors, Ranbaxy and Asian Paints have emerged as multinationals by spreading their operations worldwide. Thus, they have seen positive results from the competition with MNCs and globalization. IT-based companies like business process outsourcing companies or BPOs or call centers are another set of gainers. Other companies provide cheap data entry, accounting, and administrative services to companies abroad. They also have had a successful stint because of global access. Until now, we have largely considered the positive impact of globalization. However, not everybody has benefited from globalization. MNCs have invested in the latest technology and production methods and raised their production standards. Small producers who lack the immense resources commanded by MNCs have been forced to compete with them. This is because MNC products are today freely available in the market. Some small producers who were hit the worst by MNC competition include dairy products, toys, vegetable oils, capacitors, batteries, and so on. Some of them have either left their production units or now produce at a fraction of their earlier capacity. Another sector that has faced hardships because of globalization is labor. In many factories, working hours have increased and jobs have become insecure. MNCs often employ labor on a temporary basis. They have lost legal protection because labor laws have been liberalized in favor of the MNCs and big companies. Laborers in most companies have to work overtime to earn their livelihood, while the MNCs are making huge profits by reducing labor costs. Globalization and competition have benefited consumers, MNCs, their suppliers and allies, and big Indian companies. Nevertheless, they've also made employment uncertain and put small-scale enterprises in some difficulty. As we have seen in earlier, the fruits of globalization have been unevenly distributed. Those who have the means, be they in terms of education, wealth or skill, have benefited the most from globalization. They include well-off consumers, MNCs, their suppliers and employees, big Indian companies, IT-enabled industries like call centers, and so on. Did you know Belgium, Austria and Sweden are counted as the most globalized countries in the world? People who are not so educated, wealthy or skilled in some profession, or those who have had to compete with MNCs have not fared so well because of globalization. Those who have suffered because of globalization include small-scale producers and labor. This uneven distribution of benefits leads to the question about what can be done to make globalization fairer so that all sections can benefit from it. The government can certainly play a positive role to ensure that the benefits of globalization are indeed global and not restricted to a few. The government can formulate labor laws that are effective and watertight and ensure that the rights of workers are protected. The government can also have policies that protect the interests of the small producers against the MNCs. These protectionist measures can be withdrawn once the small producers are strong enough to stand on their own feet. Till then, the government can support their small production units. The government can also erect some barriers to protect the domestic economy from foreign trade and unfair competition from developed countries. The government can align with other developing countries to negotiate with WTO to impose trade restrictions like imposition of tariff and quotas wherever required. However, more and more people are coming to realize that it is not the responsibility of the government alone to formulate policies and negotiate to protect the rights of its small producers and laborers. In the past few years, people from various walks of life, including students, teachers, workers, small producers and professionals, have come together. Did you know the World Social Forum is a forum that meets periodically to highlight the problems that the common people face as a result of globalization? It met at Mumbai in 2004. Demonstrations are common against the unfair trade policies that are often encouraged in the name of globalization. Such demonstrations have even managed to influence some changes in the WTO's policies regarding free trade. It is time to move forward to achieve a fair globalization for all. The government's policies, as well as the people's initiative, are required to achieve such a globalization.